Part 1. Silence has begun. It all happened so fast. I didn't want to move to Galway's countryside. I loved the city just the way it was, but my parents insisted on moving away from the noise. Not that it bothered me anyway. At the age of 2, my local doctor had detected a nasty ear infection in both my ears, which was partly my fault because I was a suffer in silence type of child. My deafness wasn't going to be temporary. It would be forever permanent. However, with the help of a hearing aid and sign language, I was on the road to a less depressed lifestyle. I could hear again, but with the help of a device in my ear, rather than hearing being an automatic thing the body does. My parents had thought moving to Galway's outskirts would get me away from the loud noise of the city and into the peace and tranquility of the countryside, where fields covered the landscape like huge green shaded blankets. Oh, yes, my name is Sam, by the way. I guess you could say that I'm that type of awkward teenager with really messy brown hair, with the long legs and a bit of an awkward aura. But then again, that's just who I am. Mum says I'm quite the catch, but I don't think girls fall deeply in love with the deaf guys. I know, I'm a bit of a pessimist, but could you blame me? I've met girls before in the city, but they were never into the idea of learning sign language whenever my hearing aid acted up and needed a fix in the nearest Specsavers. That was fine by me, though. I preferred the silence of books and the occasional hour or two of killing zombies in a video game. Although hearing naturally is something I would love to have back, it does sometimes have its benefits. For instance, if my parents are in a huge argument, I can just pull my hearing aid out and everything just plunges into utter silence. Or, when they decide to have make-up sex after the argument, then I can spend that time in beautiful silence too, rather than, listening to them. I even remember when I was being bullied a few years back for being deaf. I had pulled my hearing aid out so I couldn't hear what the hater was saying to me. I had just sat there looking at him with a smug smile on my face, which, on my part, was hilarious. So maybe not hearing wasn't all that bad. So, now that my boring and uninteresting backstory is told, why don't we begin the real story? Part 2. What you know will kill you. 3 weeks later. Sam felt like his mind wasn't his own anymore. No one believed him, because it was only him experiencing this phenomenon. Is it normal to hear voices in your actual ear, despite being deaf and without a hearing aid? Voices that tell you we are coming closer? Picture frames being smashed in places where your face is situated, making you look mutilated. And a feeling of someone pressing their cold hands against your body and leaving marks, almost as if marking their territory. Sam had to deal with this himself. He had to. He was the only one to hear the voices when everyone else with hearing couldn't. It was a weekend in early June, and Sam was alone. His parents were away visiting a relative who was sick, and after a very strenuous match of back and forth sign language, they let him stay. He felt extremely uneasy about staying, but at the end of the day, he was old enough to learn that you have to face your fears no matter what. Isn't that what a real man does? 1 week previous, Sam had been doing a bit of sketching in one of his many sketchbooks. He had been designing a new poster for his room, and one of the images from one of his video games had caught his eye. So, after finding the image on social media, he had downloaded it and was now copying it freehand onto a large sheet of paper. After about 20 minutes, his masterpiece was finally coming together, so he decided to take a little break. After 10 minutes of getting food and a glass of water, he returned back to his study and gasped in horror at the sight in front of him. His drawing had been smeared over in red marker and ripped in certain places, but it wasn't the state of the image itself that made Sam's pulse beat faster than necessary. It was the writing that caught his eye. It was quite messy, but he could still make it out. We aren't the type of ghosts you kill in a video game. This was truly terrifying and something Sam had to keep a secret. Even his own parents would think that this was his own doing. He tore up the work and stuffed it into the rubbish bin. Hopefully, it was only a once-off experience. At least, that's what he thought. Present day. Staying at home alone for an average teenager should have been the opportunity to throw the biggest house party ever, or to just laze around the house watching TV and doing absolutely nothing except eating to your heart's content. But not for Sam. Staying at home brought him a feeling of uneasiness, a never-ending sickness that failed to leave his tummy alone, a niggling feeling in the back of his head telling him to get out. But at the end of the day, what could he do? Just deal with it, he told himself over and over in his head. Part 3. Don't. Just don't. That night, Sam retired to bed quite early. He figured the sooner he went to sleep, the sooner it would be morning when his parents returned home. His hearing aid lay on his bedstand within arm's reach if he needed it. The curtains danced in the cool summer breeze, swaying back and forwards. The breeze gently wafted in through the window that was left ajar. It smothered any humidity from the summer sun that had been beaming through the window all day, causing the room to become like a furnace. All that was heard was Sam's steady breathing as he slept soundly. Thump. Sam's bedroom door cracked open, the rusting hinges crying out from being disturbed. With his hearing aid out, Sam was oblivious to any sound, so he lay undisturbed in his deep slumber. A presence filled the room, a cold, venomous aura that sent chills down your back. Goosebumps multiplied rapidly over Sam's skin, and he shivered, feeling a wave run through his vertebrae. He sat up a little and observed the room, his eyes adjusting to the darkness as he took in the sight of the outline of his furniture and the possessions that stood or lay scattered on them. Then his eyes rested upon his bedroom door. I could have sworn I closed it, he thought. He pushed the duvet off himself and felt the breeze embrace his already chilled skin in an invisible hug. He grabbed for his hearing aid and his fingers closed around the device. The wooden planks which held the mattress gave out a soft creak as he pushed himself to a standing position on the hard oak floor. He took one step, his foot coming down gently on the fluffy Persian rug. Another step and a loud creak shattered the silence and echoed through his ears thanks to his hearing aid. There would come a day when he would memorize which floorboards would creak. His mother had complained about it whenever he would get up in the middle of the night to utilize the bathroom, because the floorboards would wake her up. They were that loud. More of his weight pressed down onto the floorboard, and it gave out a vibrating groan, as if standing on it was hurting it. With two final steps, he was at the bedroom door. Sam peeped his head out and was greeted by the darkness of the night and the silence of the sleeping house. The door handle, which his fingers closed around, gleamed due to the light of the full moon pushing its way in through the dancing curtains. He pushed the door closed and padded back to bed, stopping by the window to have a little peek outside. A few leaves from the full-blossomed deciduous trees were scattered about the garden below, like rich green confetti, and the whole night was still. With one final sweep of his eyes around the garden below, he padded back to his bed, removing his hearing aid in the process. With a sigh of tiredness, he fell back into bed, his body flopping against the duvet like a fish in an awkward way because of his tallness. He turned himself over, and just before his eyes shut, the door began to open again. Slowly, his eyes turned in their sockets to the direction of the door, and he gasped silently, fear overtaking his body in a way that enveloped all his remaining senses, almost paralyzing him. He sat up, his body feeling stiff with worry. He reached for his hearing aid, which he had just left on the dresser, and he froze when he saw that it was nowhere to be seen. He arose from his bed once again and stood up shakily, his legs threatening to give way if he didn't move them. With the way he was feeling right now, he felt completely useless without his hearing, or his hearing aid for that matter. He took one step, his foot landing down on the floorboard. A loud groan disturbed the silence of the dark room, but silence enveloped Sam's entire world. He made his way warily to the door and peeked out onto the dark landing, terror taking over his body. He tiptoed out a little further and strained his eyes to see down the dark hallway. He began to turn around when something, at the end of the hallway, caught his eye. A dark, black outline stood tall and evil at the corner, where the end of the hallway met the corner at the top of the stairs. Sam stepped back on impulse and slammed the door, pressing his hands against the white wood, hoping he could protect himself from the entity from coming in. Don't. Just don't. Am I going crazy? I am going crazy, he argued with himself in his mind. He took a step back, his heart beating so fast that it threatened to beat from his chest. The floorboard gave out an agonizing groan from behind him. Forget about memorizing which board was which, because this board was right behind him. He didn't hear it, but he felt it shift beneath him. This vibration was only a step behind him.